All right, let's set the scene. It's the year 1590, and one man, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, is this close to doing the impossible, unifying all of Japan under his rule. He's got the South, he's got the West, but there's one last massive roadblock in his way. The Hojo clan, hunkered down in their fortress, a castle everyone thinks is absolutely invincible.
But just outside those castle walls, the scene was just bizarre. I'm talking actors, jugglers, merchants, all mingling with an army of over 200,000 soldiers. There's a quote from a soldier who was actually there that sums it up perfectly. This isn't a siege, this is a carnival. This wasn't just war, this was theater.
And that really gets to the core question here, doesn't it? When you're facing an enemy that's so powerful, so dug in, that a straight-up attack is basically suicide, what do you do? Well, Hideyoshi's answer would literally change the map of Japan forever.
Now, to really get why this was such a huge deal, you first have to understand the Hojo. These guys weren't just some local lords. No, they were the last major domino that had to fall before Hideyoshi could finally claim his prize of a totally unified country.
The Hojo were sitting on a mountain of power. First off, they controlled the Kanto Plain, which was basically the richest piece of real estate in the entire country. Then you have their castle, Odawara, an absolute beast of a fortress, shielded by mountains on one side and the sea on the other. And crucially, they had a family connection to Tokugawa Ieyasu, who was maybe the one guy in Japan as dangerous as Hideyoshi himself. I mean, on paper, the Hojo looked completely unbeatable.
So Hideyoshi, being the slick operator he was, tried talking first. He told the Hojo to come to the capital and bow. They said no. Even Ieyasu jumped in to try and make peace, but it didn't work. The final straw, though, came when one of the Hojo's underlings got cocky and attacked another lord's castle. This was a direct violation of Hideyoshi's brand new no more fighting rule. And that was it. The line had been crossed. Diplomacy was officially over. But Hideyoshi knew that a typical bloody siege was doomed to fail, so he went for something totally different. A siege that wasn't about breaking down walls, it was about breaking down their minds.
Just try to picture this. Inside Odawara Castle, the Hojo defenders are feeling pretty good. They've got plenty of food, they're safe behind their giant walls, playing games, just waiting it out. But outside? Oh, outside was a totally different world. Hideyoshi wasn't just sitting there. He threw a non-stop, months-long party. He brought in his soldiers' wives, entertainers, merchants, you name it. He was creating a spectacle, a show of overwhelming force and confidence designed to completely demoralize the guys watching from the battlements.
Every single performance, every tea ceremony Hideyoshi held right in front of them was a weapon. The Hojo were geared up for a grim, grinding war. What they got instead was a front-row seat to the enemy's victory parade before the battle was even over. The psychological pressure must have been just immense.
But that whole carnival, that was just the warm-up act. Hideyoshi's grand finale, his real masterpiece, was a feat of engineering and pure psychological trickery that became the stuff of legend.
So get this. For 80 days, hidden by a thick forest on a nearby hill, Hideyoshi had his army build an entire, real stone castle, completely in secret. Then, one night, he gave the order, cut down the trees, all of them. The next morning, the Hojo defenders woke up, looked out, and saw a massive fortress staring back at them that just wasn't there the day before. It looked like magic, like it had been built in a single night. Whatever fight they had left in them, it just evaporated. That was the knockout punch. And just as their spirits were completely shattered, the final nail in the coffin arrived. Their last hope for help, a powerful northern lord named Date Masamune, shows up and immediately swears loyalty to Hideyoshi right in front of them. It was over. The Hojo surrendered, their leaders were forced to commit ritual suicide, and the invincible fortress fell without one last desperate fight.
Okay, so Japan is unified. Fantastic. But now Hideyoshi has a new, massive problem on his hands. What do you do with all that rich land you just conquered from the Hojo? And his answer? Well, it was one of the riskiest political bets in all of Japanese history.
Before we get into what he did, we need to quickly understand this one word, koku. The simplest way to think about it is that koku was the currency of power back then. It's a measure of how much rice a territory produced. So the more koku you controlled, the bigger your army could be, and the more powerful you were. It's that simple.
So, who gets this incredible prize, the richest region in Japan? Hideyoshi gives it to his most powerful rival, Tokugawa Ieyasu. In one move, he makes Ieyasu astronomically powerful, boosting his income to about 2.5 million koku.
This basically made Ieyasu the wealthiest lord in the entire country. So why on earth would he do that?
On the surface, it seems insane, but Hideyoshi had his reasons. Or at least he thought he did. First, it moved Ieyasu way out east, far from the capital and the center of power. Second, it put his strongest rival in charge of a rebellious region, keeping him busy. But the biggest part of the bet was Hideyoshi's assumption that the proud local samurai, who had just been defeated, would never be truly loyal to their new boss, Ieyasu. It was a huge roll of the dice, and, as history shows, it was a gamble he would ultimately lose.
Hideyoshi had done it. He'd reached the absolute summit. Japan was finally one nation. But just as he got everything he ever wanted, a string of personal tragedies started to pull his entire legacy apart at the seams.
The last few years of his life are just heartbreakingly chaotic. In 1591, his only son and heir dies. A year later, desperate, he adopts his nephew to be the next ruler. But then, in 1593, a new son is born, which throws the whole succession plan into chaos. Just 2 years after that, in a paranoid rage, Hideyoshi accuses his adopted heir of treason and forces him to kill himself. And then, by 1598, Hideyoshi himself is dead, leaving a little 5-year-old boy to rule a nation full of the most ambitious and dangerous warlords in history.
And here is the ultimate, unbelievable irony of the whole story. On his deathbed, to try and protect his little boy, Hideyoshi sets up a council of the 5 most powerful lords to rule until his son came of age. And who does he put in charge of this council? The man he had just made the wealthiest, most powerful lord in all of Japan, Tokugawa Ieyasu. He literally put his son's future and his entire family's legacy right into the hands of his greatest rival.
Hideyoshi was a master of war, politics, and psychology, a man who rose from nothing to become the ruler of a nation. He did the impossible. He unified Japan. But that final massive gamble he made, the one that came from his greatest victory, is what set the stage for his own family's destruction. He left behind a unified country, for sure, but he also left behind the biggest question of all. Now that it was unified, who was going to own it?